Hi there, how's everybody doing? Hugh here with you again. Appreciate you all tuning in. And I'm going to read some more from some prison writing I did when I was incarcerated at Leavenworth Federal Prison back between 2009 and 2011. What I'm going to read for you now is one of the earliest things I remember writing. It's a story and a thing that happened. Reminder though, I did change all the names of everybody involved in this whole thing, including my own. I went by the name of Benjamin Hughes, and I changed the name of the prison from Leavenworth, Kansas to Lincolnwood, Wyoming. So, what I'm going to write here for you, it's about a fella that I read to you about a little bit before, the first person I actually met when I went into prison there. An older fella, and he was a businessman and got caught up in tax evasion, and he didn't have a very long sentence, 15 months, by comparison to a lot, but in some ways, relatively, it's a long time for being in that kind of situation, and it's different. And so he talked about how he missed being able to smoke cigarettes, and then somebody hooked him up with some contraband smokes, and he got wrapped up in that, but then he got wrapped up in another thing that's more unfair, you know. And so I'm going to read this to you. This is called Nick Goes to the Hole. Hope you enjoy this. Nick was going to the hole, or the shoe, which stood for Special Housing Unit, a place for punishment, sometimes protection, and it was also where you went if you were just coming into prison or getting transferred somewhere else. Nick was getting transferred. He failed a drug test, a urinary analysis, even though he hadn't been high in years. The problem was that Nick had the fussy prostate of a 60-year-old man and just couldn't make it happen after 2 hours and an 8-ounce glass of water. That was all you got, and failure to piss was a failure to pass. Then they shipped you out. He could barely make it happen by his own will on a good day, much less at the whim of the Bureau of Prisons, our esteemed babysitters. Fortune has a way of turning on us, and it had for Nick. He was headed out of our minimum security prison camp and off to some joint full of bank robbers and baby rapers. Cigarettes and all tobacco products were banned from federal prisons in 2004, but Nick was an addict, often prone appropriately to Nick fits. Tobacco still got smuggled in from the outside to the camp, and it made good money for the guards. But there was only one way that Nick could smoke in the hole, and I was going to help him out because he was a good friend of mine. I chopped vegetables every morning in the prison kitchen, but I had no business to be in the storage room at that time of the day, and I'll admit that I was afraid of getting caught. Wearing my most fearless face, I wandered down the hallway, and as usual, there were a handful of inmates in the chow hall. Some were reading, others were playing chess, and some were just talking. I was going to miss Nick, old crank that he was, because not only was he a friend of mine, but he was also the first guy I met while I came to prison. They'd stuck us both in a holding cell at the main penitentiary on the day we both surrendered, and we happened to arrive at the height of the swine flu pandemic in 2009. The guards made us wear the sort of useless face masks one puts on before mowing the lawn in pollen season. I also remember I had a terrible hangover. My first impression of him was that he was a frail old man with his gray hair starting to thin on the top and his lean frame, but that didn't turn out to be the truth at all. The real Nick was a tough and defiant old coot. He rarely hid his true feelings about anything, but he adapted pretty well to prison life and got along with most everybody. That day we sat in the holding cell, we both mentioned how we were going to miss smoking cigarettes. It wasn't but a few days into our bit that Nick submitted to the urge and smoked as much as he could get right up to the very end. The very reason that I was on my mission to the kitchen storage room. Mr. Franz was on duty as the kitchen cop, and I wasn't happy about that, as he was the last goon I wanted to encounter on that particular afternoon. Franz was a portly and sloppy alcoholic with a mustache that ran across his lip down both sides of his mouth. He fancied himself as a modern-day gunslinger, with equal affections for Crystal Palace vodka and Krispy Kreme donuts. He used to work up at the big house, the main penitentiary up on the hill, where inmates stabbed officers and each other. We were surprised that Franz was still walking among the living. I regarded him as a genuinely unenlightened character, and I did my best to avoid him whenever possible. Franz seemed to appreciate me just as well. Since I was a bearded Caucasian in federal prison, he assumed I was locked up for a methamphetamine-related crime. One day, while I was at work, I forgot some routine task, and he snarled, "I bet you never forgot nothing while you were cooking that meth." "I'm here for mail fraud, sir," I calmly replied. "Mail fraud? What were you mailing? Meth?" Ha 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 ha. All the inmates who heard the exchange that day laughed with him as he strutted away, proud of his clever remark. One of the cooks let me know that Franz called me Rain Man behind my back, likely because I was bashful and overwhelmed when I first came in, and I had a slight stutter. It took a while for me to project the voice. It took a while for me to project my voice with strength and confidence. "Rain Man?" I said to the cook. "Well, I'd rather be an idiot savant than just a plain old idiot." The cook had never heard the term savant. Apologies. The cook had never heard the term savant, nor had he been aware of the movie Rain Man, so he just smiled politely and walked away. I strolled casually through the kitchen and into the storage room, where I found a box of clear plastic gloves on the shelf, and I shoved a handful of them into my pocket. As quickly as I heard the sound of jingling keys, I spun around as Franz sauntered in and bellowed, "What the fuck are you doing in here, Hughes?" He jabbed his sausage finger at my chest when he said the word "you." "I lost my coffee cup. I think I left it in here. You find it?" "No! Now get!" Franz aimed his thumb behind him as he said the word "get," and that's what I did. I stomped off free of suspicion with at least a half dozen of the disposable gloves for Nick. When I returned to the dorm unit, Nick was in one of the bathroom stalls behind a curtain made out of an old sheet. The guards removed the doors on the stalls years before because inmates kept filling the bathroom with cigarette smoke. So we just hung up the sheets and kept smoking. Bugler rolling tobacco was the most common in the prison camp, and it was the same stuff I used to smoke back in the free world. I was tempted regularly by the constant aroma, but I managed to resist the nagging urges. Nick was courtesy flushing, but it didn't improve the odor in the room very much. I left the bathroom and waited for him beside my bunk. I opened an old issue of National Geographic that I found in the library, but I couldn't focus on it. I read the same paragraph over and over while I waited. Nick stepped into the shower, a wise move before going to the hole, since the showers in there were moldy. Most of them didn't have shower heads. The doldrums in the hole can devastate the mind. Inmates like to flush the shower heads down the toilets. When he finally came out of the bathroom, I walked over to his bunk and said, "I got the gloves." "Thank you, Ben." He took the gloves from my hand. He set the gloves down on his locker next to a jar of hand lotion and his stash of tobacco, and he sighed as he thought through his task, which I could only imagine to be in direct opposition to 6 decades of a dignified existence. At one time, I employed over 2,000 workers in my companies. That's a lot. I wasn't always loved, but I think I was a fair boss. That's all anybody could ask of you. Did you know I have 14 grandchildren? Wow, 14. I felt dumb and didn't know what I should say. That's a lot, also. Yeah, they say that Christmas just wasn't the same this year without me. Bless their little hearts. He shook his head and cracked his knuckles. His tone turned bitter. It's almost crazy, but I've been a generous contributor to a hell of a lot of political campaigns over the years. Senators, congressmen, at the state and federal level. For what? The question seemed rhetorical, so I just nodded my head. All the money in the world couldn't free Nick from the shackles of prison, nor from nicotine addiction. I watched as he poured an ample pinch of tobacco inside the palm of one glove, careful to keep its fingers empty, and then placed a handful of rolling papers and a matchbook next to the tobacco. He tied the glove and stuck it inside 2 others, wadded it all up into a compressed ball. When he was finished, he nodded and appeared satisfied with his effort, having nothing civilized with which to compare it. He stared at me for a second and let out another long sigh. Clad only in his white boxers, he took the ball of contraband and the bottle of moisturizing lotion back into the bathroom stall behind the makeshift curtain. "Nicholas Smith, report to the bubble," blared over the intercom. The bubble is the central office of the camp, where the guards hang out most of the time. The intercom blasted orders for various inmates and staff to come to the bubble all day long. A minute later, Nick staggered out of the bathroom and dressed himself in his khakis and boots, struggling to maneuver without showing obvious discomfort. He sniffed and cleared his throat a few times, striving only to endure the indignity. I quickly shook Nick's hand and made some preposterous comment like, "You'll be all right." And he nodded and hobbled down the stairs, one cautious step at a time. He stopped halfway down and turned to me. "Do me a favor, would you, Ben?" "Sure." "Don't use my real name. Everybody gets a new name." At the bottom of the steps, he turned the corner and was gone. So that was the first passage I wrote while I was there as a story, the thing. that I experience with the people. And people kind of got the idea that I was writing, and I was a writer. I was in the past world a creative person and all, and you know, but people support that kind of stuff there. There, people who wrote, but there was people who made visual art and sculptures. There were folks who made elaborate sculptures out of the potato chip bags. They were plain silver. I mean, they were probably from some company, but they didn't have a label on them that we got when like the power or the water was off or there was lockdown. We got served bag lunches of bologna sandwiches and a bag of chips in a plain silver bag. Well, people would collect those bags, hang on to them because a fella would turn them into twist them and excuse me, turn them into sculptures and things. That was something that was just wildly creative, and other people uh, drew. They could get colored pencils and made incredible art. There was just time to do that kind of stuff. Uh, the regular world was not cluttering your brain with the bills you were trying to pay or the you know your car registration that you made sure was up to date, or any stuff like that. You had the kind of time that people begged to have. Maybe dare say the kind of time that people would trade in their freedom to have. But people, could focus on stuff. I got to focus on writing. I don't have the same level of focus that I can now, but I, have some, but just the ability to write and create, because you're not living in the regular world. You're living in that strange world. So I hope you enjoyed this, though. It feels good to read this stuff to you, rediscovering it myself after these 15 years or so. If you enjoy this, please consider subscribing to the channel. It would really help me out a lot. And I look forward to talking to you all again. Appreciate you. All right, take care.